Welcome to the One Another podcast, where we explore the beauty of difference and the necessity of connection. I'm Sarah, your host, and this is episode 1. I'm so excited. I'm really grateful today to be joined by two dear friends who are with me in my studio here, Andrea and Cindy.
Hello.
Hey.
Oh my goodness. So one of the things that matters most to me about this podcast is that it's not something I'm just here doing by myself. And I've definitely needed the support of these two and others who will, I know, join in at different points along the journey. But Cindy and I have been friends now for at least 15 years. Mm-hmm. And Andrea and I connected just over a year ago. And so I love, even with those two different timelines, both of these women have become people whose wisdom and honesty and presence I trust so much. So I'm really grateful that you're both here. And yeah, just to be collaborators, conversation partners. Right now, just as this podcast gets off the ground, I'm so grateful that you both said yes to this. Part of what feels important to me is not just to have people who agree with me, but people who are willing to sit inside these questions and wrestle with the difficult things. That's why I think even as we move forward, I look forward to having lots of different voices from lots of different perspectives. Because this is called the One and Other podcast, I want to explain a little bit before I bring in Andrea and Cindy to share just what does that mean? So that this idea of one and other was really born out of my own story. I went through my own unexpected spiritual identity shift, and I've happened to have had these certain themes continue to pop up for me again and again. And so I'm just going to list a few things: belonging versus otherness, authenticity versus conformity, judgment versus curiosity, and for me, really having to learn what does it look like to move away from us versus them. So I really believe we all came into this life with lessons to learn, and for me, and that we're all here learning something through what I like to call Earth School. And for me, my curriculum in Earth School has been touching on all of these themes, and so I'm still learning those lessons, and I will probably be learning them for the rest of my life. But this one and other, I really do believe that we are all somehow one, that we're somehow all mysteriously connected, whether we believe that we're all connected to God, we're all a part of the divine, however you want to say that. But we're also other, we're distinct, we're unique for a reason. And those two things can be difficult to hold together. So this idea of one and other, the One Another podcast, kind of touching on this idea that from my tradition, the Jesus tradition, teaching us to love one another, I'm curious about phrasing it differently. How do we love this one that we're all connected to and our distinction, the other? So I don't know. I just feel like there has to be a way to somehow stay connected to the people that we love, even when our beliefs and our identities and our experiences don't line up neatly. When we have that friction, when we feel our difference. And I think that this seems to be one of the hardest parts of life. At least it has been for me, because our egos and our culture is always telling us that we're separate. It's this like, wait, are we one? Because I feel real different right now from that person, or I feel real separate. So yeah, this is the space where I'd love to be wrestling through these ideas and walking alongside each other and talking about them. And I plan to share resources along the way that have been helpful for me. I'd love to hear other people share resources, but yeah, books and songs and tools. And really for me, I guess the point of that has been, I want to be able to hold space for people that are different from me in my life. I want to stay connected and close, even when it feels we're very different in different ways. But for my journey, the path has been that I needed to first learn how to accept and love who I am. I think that I'm still having to learn that all the time. It's like, wow, how do I hold space for someone else's difference if I can't really appreciate my own quirks, my own unique things? So I don't know if that touched on everything to kind of give the layout. What do you think, ladies, in terms of one and other? There's a tension there, and I think it'd be fun to talk about that.
It needs unpacked, yeah.
Yeah, I know. There's more that we'll need
There's a lot to it.
To keep unpacking. And I'll just say one more thing before we have you guys share, is just I recently finished writing a book, and that's been big. You both have been a part of that, and several other of my friends have really supported just me as I've been writing that for the last 5 years. It's called Becoming the Other, How I Accidentally Discovered Beauty in All That I Once Feared. And it's really the story of my unexpected spiritual journey. What I discovered through my own evolving faith really is that so many of the things I was taught to fear, difference, uncertainty, contradiction, were actually doorways that ended up becoming doorways into deeper connection. So connection to myself and connection to others. And that was really, I just could have never imagined that I'd be where I am today and feel so rooted and so connected to God and so grateful. So thank you for being on that journey with me, listening, reading my book. Both of you have been a part of that. Wow. And this podcast is, I think, just really an outflow of all that I've wrestled with as I wrote my book, all that I feel passionate about. So I want to ask you both, what made you say yes to being a part of this podcast? And maybe was there something or anything that felt a little risky about saying yes?
I'll let you go first.
All right. Well, thanks, Sarah. That was, I loved hearing you share all that. Thank you.
Yeah.
So, so like Sarah said, we've been friends for 15 years. Mm-hmm. And we've had a lot of exploration together in our families, our personal lives, and our growth. Mm-hmm. I just remember, like, Sarah and I will have long phone conversations, like hour, 2 hours, sometimes even a little beyond that. And
your poor husband, he's always wondering, oh no, are you on the phone with Sarah?
I know. I think that's just because he's jealous because I talk to you so much, and he's like, wait a minute, is there any left for me? But yeah, so, we'll be in these conversations and I just feel so energized and inspired. Like oftentimes you'll bring these new ideas and, challenging thoughts, or, you'll just ask me these questions that I really hadn't considered. And it would spark something in me. And so there have been many, many times where I will, just be in this conversation with you, and I think to myself, gosh, we should be recording this. And for no other reason but just to have it. But then also I always thought it would be fun to share it. I don't know. I just feel like it was just because I was so inspired and I felt so energized by it. I thought, gosh, it'd be fun to share this. I can't imagine other people wouldn't feel the same way, and yeah, there were some challenging conversations as well. So It wasn't always good, but I've come to appreciate more of the challenging conversations. Turns out that that's really where I grow, is when I'm with people that are willing to not be afraid to say challenging things or be challenging. And I don't have to be afraid of it. So it's been a really great point of growth for me. So it was a natural progression, I think, in our relationship as friends for me to say yes, to be on this, because feels like a continuation of my personal growth. And then I love being a part of these conversations. It's feels so good to my heart. So
I love it.
So thank you.
Of course.
Thanks for having me.
Grateful.
Well, like you said, we really got to know each other a year ago. But when we got to know each other, we shared our stories. And in sharing our stories, I realized that we had been going through a lot of similarities, some differences, but a lot of similarities over the last decade or so. Yeah. But for the last decade or so, I've been doing it very much alone with my husband. My children were there. A lot of times there was just no one to talk to. And then you gave me your book, and I listened/read your book, and I was like, wow, like this is so familiar. It feels so good just to know someone else was going through some of these similar things. And so I realized, being a part of this podcast, I get to be that voice where other people are connecting and saying, oh wow, other people are dissecting that, or unpacking that, or trying to figure that out, or having to learn from that mistake. And so just to be that voice where we're realize that we're all a part of the human story. We each have a part. And the question about the risk actually intrigued me, because I realized, so I want to have a balanced voice, because yes, my voice is my connection to others, so that they're not alone, I'm not alone, we're connecting. But it also can be that thing that's condescending or condemning, or saying I'm right and you're wrong. So it's that balance of, I want to use my voice, I want to tell my story, I want to share my life with others, because I want to connect. And just that balanced voice, though, that is doing it with love and honoring where they are at and where their story is. So
I love that.
That was the risk part for me.
It's so beautiful, Andrea. I love that.
Thank you.
It's definitely, this has been such an interesting experience, just talking about the idea of this podcast. I think, conceptually, it's like we could stay all up in our head with like, oh, how are we one and how are we other? But really, where it is interesting is in how we're living that out and what it actually looks like when you're with people who are different. I mean, the thing that's popping up in my head really when it comes to these ideas, one of the, I shared in the beginning that my story and the theme of my book is that I went through this unexpected shift, spiritually speaking. I was raised conservative evangelical and was very committed to my faith and ministry, and was totally on a path that I thought I foresaw would never change, that it would stay in that one realm. And as my life went along, there was these key moments where I had to start asking questions that, as I was following Jesus and feeling like I want my life to mirror how Jesus lived. Is this how, is this the right way to walk? And is this the right way? And in just how that led one thing to another in terms of church changing, and then evaluating all sorts of things that I never expected to question or look at. There's so much in that feels really vulnerable. So much in that it's hard to know, who do I talk to about that? That was something I struggled with along the way. Is it safe to talk about some of these doubts and questions? Is it, where do I find safety? And I think there's so many people that can relate to that feeling of, if I'm in a certain system or structure and I start to think outside of what everyone else is thinking, where do I go with that? What do I do with that? And then one of my other defining moments was when my firstborn came out as gay, and that experience of experiencing someone who has a very different, like my own child coming into themselves and discovering like that they have a crush on someone. I was seeing like, whoa, this is so different. And all my life that was, I had seen the LGBTQ community as very scary and different. And Emma, my journey with Emma was so beautiful because this is my child. I mean, there's no one I love more.
Yeah.
And being on that journey with them and being able to experience as much as they were willing to share with me changed me. It just changed me. And I could never, now I can see, I see differently now because of my exposure to Emma. So it's like, again, it'll be interesting to talk through with you all, with others around, like where have you experienced maybe some tension around otherness? Even that would be a good question. I'm totally not looking at using our notes right now, but I think for me, the intended question that I was going to start with is focusing on the and today, but I guess this still sort of feels important to setting the stage for what we're talking about in this podcast. Is like, in most spiritual traditions, there is the same underlying theme of oneness, and even in faiths and religions where it seems very black and white, there's still, you can find the thread and through it all where you can find that peace that, gosh, you know what? We're all people. We're all humans who are looking for meaning, who we all know that we need love. You know, in the message of Christianity, Jesus said, love your neighbor as yourself. Like, everyone has a way that they would like to feel loved. So there's some connection where we all feel like we're one. And the other part represents the distinction. And I was telling the two of you on our last meeting last week that for me, as I'm thinking about this, the most important part of that is the and. Is, okay, but how do we hold that and? How do we hold both? And it was Andrea that said, I think that's going to be the name of this podcast. We need to focus it on the and. So
Yeah.
this is the question that we're going to chew on first, and I'd love to hear, what we all have to say in terms of this. Is it easy or difficult for you to hold a both and perspective? This podcast, I think we're going to be chewing on a lot of things that where there's two sides to something, but then there's also the and. There's instead of a but, there's an and. How do we hold that? So, do you feel like it's easy or fairly easy for you or difficult for you to do that, to hold a both and? That's just a starting point.
Yeah, I know. Okay, so we were briefly mentioning this last week, and where I landed in our conversation and where I want to go to now is it depends on the context and whether or not it's personal. So, which I think is true for most of us, right?
Yeah.
When there's a trigger, which generally stems from something that is very important to us or makes us uncomfortable. So I think for me to best share this would be just to share a personal story.
Yeah.
And in this particular case, it has to do with my family, more of a family dynamic. So I'm a mom of a 23-year-old and a 20-year-old. And my 23-year-old is a male. And side note, I'm sure we'll get into this at some point, but one of the main reasons why I'm here in this time is to learn how to forgive the masculine. So it's really no surprise that my first child is a boy and definitely carries the masculine energy. Although, as I've learned more about what that looks like and the feminine, I think he's pretty well balanced in both.
Because we all have both.
Yeah, we all have both. But anyhow, okay, so our son moved home this summer. And he's been gone for about 3.5, 4 years.
Oh, wow.
And so he said he wanted to come back home to get healthy, but mostly to heal his relationships with his dad and I and his younger sister.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Which I really commended him for, and I'm grateful. It's been hard and beautiful all at the same time. So he moved back in May, and he'd been home for about a month and a half, and he asked me a question one evening, and the question was, what intention did you birth me with?
Wow.
And yeah, it was. And I said I was in my early 20s. I don't even think I knew what an intention was.
Yeah.
I just, without going into all the details, because I could go down several trails right now, but I'm going to stay on point. So it took me about 20 minutes to answer the question, and he would not let me off the hook, which I'm grateful that he didn't. There were tears in his eyes. There were tears in my eyes. It felt like a very serious moment. He really wanted to know, because he said he already knew. He just needed me to acknowledge it. So that also was okay, so...
Was he asking you on a soul level, or just as a mom consciously? Do you know?
I think he was asking me both.
Okay, interesting.
And I answered it. The first thing that came to my mind after several minutes of just sitting there thinking about it was that I don't want you to be like my dad. And he said, bingo. He said, I have felt that since the time I was born. Wow. You have spent the entire time raising me to not be like somebody.
Wow.
And you've missed the opportunity to see me as who I am. So how does this relate to the and? The and for me was more of a personal, emotional piece, because it's this part. It's like, there is mom guilt. We know that's a real thing, right? I mean, I was in a dark spiral for 3 days, probably. Long time, because that hit me hard, because it's true. And I could see all the ways that wounded him. And so I had a lot of guilt around that. However, there's another part of me that I didn't intentionally do that to hurt him.
No.
Right? So what I am learning what I learned this summer, and I'm still continuing to learn, like, this is just one example, but my life seems to be full of these kinds of examples where there are parts of me that did the best I could.
Yeah.
But they were parts of me also that had pain and trauma, I guess, to use a word that I know is overused, but I don't know what else to use.
Right.
And as a result, I hurt people and people that I loved. And yet there is a part of me that is also like, I'm a very loving person, and I don't ever intend to hurt anybody. So I hope that doesn't sound too complicated, but for me, like right now, that feels very present. Like, that's one example of how do I hold the and in both. Like I have hurt people that I love, and I could choose to punish myself for the rest of my life and live as a victim, or I could choose forgiveness.
Sure.
And also see the other part of myself that just did the best that I could.
Absolutely.
And I am actually love.
Yeah.
I am, and that doesn't, just because that happened, doesn't negate the fact that I am a loving, beautiful person, and a mom that cares deeply.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
So does that make sense?
Yeah, that's a big and to be holding.
So
for
like
sure.
that's the and so I wanted to bring that in because that's how my
Both can be
identity
true,
shifts
right?
have come into place.
Yes.
Where my shifts have not come from like a structural shift or like that kind of thing. It's been more of like an internal working of like, oh, family stuff.
Yeah.
Right?
Sure.
So yeah. Anyway.
I love that.
It made a lot more sense in my
you.
head, but even as
No,
I was
that
saying
was
it,
so
I'm like, does that
good.
even articulate the and?
No, yeah,
Yes.
it
Okay.
definitely does.
Okay.
It's anytime two things that can seem opposing, can both be true. I mean,
Okay.
they don't have to seem opposing. I mean,
Yeah.
we're all one and we're all distinct. Like those two things can be true. We hurt people and we're also doing the best we can at the same time. Those two things can be true, and it's so easy to be stuck in either one or the other idea that
Right.
and having the ability to say and brings some distance, right? It like helps you sit back a little bit and look at the whole picture and not be in this one spot.
Yeah.
Or
I
not
feel
so
like
stuck.
I have these moments throughout my day,
Yeah.
every day.
That's powerful.
I'm continually being confronted with recognizing that there is always an and.
Yeah.
And I have a choice.
Yeah.
That it's okay, I can have both. You can call it light, dark, shadow, whatever stuff, right?
Yeah, totally.
But it's something I see all the time, all day, every day. And well, more so recently. And
That's beautiful.
I want to learn that practice of holding that
So
space
Yeah.
in a way that doesn't feel like judgment toward myself. And I also know that can come out as judgment toward other people too.
Yeah,
So, and that's hard to do.
totally. Thank you. That was
Hard to do.
a powerful story.
That was beautiful.
Yeah. What about you, Andrea? I mean, I think sometimes I wonder, and this is partly because I love to study everybody's charts and our unique design. I'm always thinking often in the astrology lens, and both of you carry some, Gemini energy, and I happen to carry a lot of I'm Sagittarius rising, and Gemini is represented by the two faces, which are looking in opposite directions. And so Gemini brings this energy of being able to see two things at once. And since I have very little of that, and I carry a lot of the opposing energy of Sagittarius, which is really represented by the arrow pointing up, this like quest for truth. The shadow of that is this tendency towards certainty and thinking that there's this one thing that's right. And so knowing that you two carry some, more of the Gemini, that was maybe part in my mind of like, is it easier or difficult for you to hold both? But I love that you were saying, Cindy, like it really is not. I mean, it goes way beyond. It's just the humanness of being able to hold it. But there are distinctions, I think, in how we're all designed.
Yeah, for sure. Well, you almost took the words out of my mouth when you started. So I totally agree. Like, it's really easy to hold both with love when you don't have a past or you haven't been hurt or if there's no triggers involved. You see someone who maybe different than you or think different than you, and if it hasn't their situation, their path, their choices haven't ever affected you, it's very easy to love. But if it's something that's affected you, and my two examples were men and religion, those have affected me. They have wounded me. I've had to undo triggers because of them. So then it's a lot harder to not have that perspective where it's me and them instead of we are together, the and perspective. But I realized when that happens, it's because there's something in me that needs to heal. I don't need to change them. I don't need to get them on a different path or have them make a different decision, or they do them. That means if I'm being triggered, there's something that needs that healing in me. And you told a beautiful story that related to that. So yeah, very similar to what she said. It must be because we're exactly alike.
And I think that's like speaks to personal responsibility, and I think when we can really hone in on that, then that also does help us to hold the and
absolutely
when when we do take that responsibility, which is not easy to do as well. But it sure feels better when you can practice that.
When I touched on it by talking about that Sagittarius part of me, but I think there's also the conditioning and the way we were raised that would impact whether or not it's easy to hold both and also those wounds that you grew up with. Yes. And in my young life, I write about this in my book, I had circumstances in my childhood that led me to believe as a very little girl that in order to have belonging, I needed to be the good girl. I needed to do the right thing, and that included obedience to my parents, obedience to God, and just I felt, that's the way I received the story of my life when I was young, that I needed to be good, and that there was one definition of good, and I needed to find it. And again, I think that's a combination of my experiences as a young person and also my design. I am wired naturally, for those that study, personality and temperament, I'm an Enneagram type 3, which is about being an achiever. And so, I have this big energy of Sagittarius, which is also that seeking and that striving energy. But for me, I would say most of my young life, it probably would have been very difficult for me to hold a both and perspective. I think in so many ways, I was always looking for the one right answer. Yeah. I was always looking for, and that was very much, it was warned against to be too wishy-washy, in the world that I grew up in. It was like, if you tell people that there's many different truths, then you're basically giving people an excuse to sin, or you're giving an excuse to follow all these random wandering paths which could lead people astray. And I was taught that there is one truth, and it is, in my tradition, it's this way. You study the Bible, you follow Jesus in the way that we interpret that path to be. And so I wouldn't say, it's like I can't just blame that on my church or my, family structure or any one thing or my personality and how I happen to be I'm just too intense. I definitely felt that way about myself for a long time, but it was sort of the perfect storm maybe for me to have the personality and the familial and cultural. I mean, I have a very loving family, and I actually have a really chill set of parents. My dad was always the one saying, Sarah, you really need to lighten up a little bit. He would say, you don't want to be so heavenly minded that you're no earthly good.
Yeah.
But, so yeah, it's just interesting when you look at it. But I would say that this has been more new for me to be able to hold two truths at once. And through relationships in my life, it has continued to, I've had the opportunity to start to see, like, wait a minute. Okay, like there's not one right way to, look at your politics. I remember when that first changed for me. It was like, whoa, there's like two sets of people, in my small church that have really different views on politics, and they're both backing it up with scripture. Like, that's interesting, and one is looking at it from a moral conservative perspective. One is looking at it from a social justice perspective. All of it is definitely, justified in the Bible if you take certain passages, and then obviously, having, I think that's where those kind of things change you, is in relationship, when you actually have people in your life who see things differently, and you feel and them, and so you're like, wait, but I like that person, but they think real different than me on this. What do I do with that? And I guess that's another question that maybe this is a silly question, because it seems so, it's just in our face all the time. But the other discussion question that I had written down is, why is this idea of "and" so important right now? Do you guys have any thoughts on that?
Well, before I answer that question, I just want to make a quick comment, just because I've known you for so long, Sarah, that I appreciate your background and where you have come from, because you've come a long way. I can see your desire to really hold both. Yeah. And you are such a loving person. You care so deeply. And in some ways, it's no accident that you've had such a juxtaposition in where you were and as far as like your thought process goes, and needing certainty to where you are now, and recognizing that actually that has maybe stifled your growth, that now. I love what you said in the beginning of the podcast with how those areas where you wanted so much certainty has, like, now that you've seen that you don't need that as much, that it's been like a doorway for you to really have deeper friendships, deeper connection with yourself. So I just want to acknowledge, because I've known you for so long, that I really respect you for your desire, and I'm seeing you really evolve in this area. I mean, come on, we're doing a podcast now on it. Well, you are, because this is what you're about.
It does feel really ironic, and that's the thing. That's the reason why. I mean, one of the subtitles.
That's your life theme.
Yes,
of course it would be ironic.
Yeah, one of the subtitles of my book that I played with, and I still don't know exactly where it will land, but the book's Becoming the Other, and one of the other subtitles would have been How I Accidentally Became All the People I Once Judged.
I love that.
And I still kind of feel like I don't know which one is it? Which one feels more accurate? But. Both. Like discovering beauty in all that I once feared, and also becoming all the people I once judged. I mean, I could just list way too many instances, and I talk about a lot of them. I mean, I was motivated by this sincere desire to be pleasing to my parents and God, and to be good, and to live right. Have a life that's, just like the Bible talked about, that Jesus came to give us life abundant. I was like, this is the path. I want to be on the abundant, beautiful life path. And so I'm going to follow what I need to follow. I was voted most conservative in my high school. I laugh about, just I soaked it all in, right? Like at youth group when we were talking about sex and dating, and they passed out these commitment cards to stay pure until your marriage and wedding day. They were called Virgin Pride cards, and I brought those Virgin Pride cards with me to my public high school, and not only did I carry them proudly, I asked other students at my high school if they wanted to make the same commitment.
You're gonna do it right, girl.
And
you're not gonna mess around.
Yeah, so it's just like the stories that I can look back on the person that I was when I was younger. Like I can now look back with like fondness and love for her and be like, oh my gosh, of course, she was a little Aries moon. She was not just going to back down. She had double fire sign, Aquarius, like, son, I'm here to be a visionary outsider. I don't need to be like everybody else. I can be weird and different.
Yeah.
But that young version of me, if she knew that I would in 20, 30 years be talking about my astrology and asking for, talking to people about human design and all of these, quote, new agey ideas, would have been she would have just passed away. She would have just not been checked okay. Out. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And yet the beauty of, just that integration and just the just being able to see the journey. Like, are we ever supposed to just stay in one spot? I mean, I think unfortunately I did absorb that message. I remember being told, if you're not growing closer to Jesus, you're growing away from him. And so I interpreted that as, and also just being seen, my whole young life, that like at the end of a church service, let's pray for all those people who've fallen away from the Lord. And so there was this sense of like, oh no, like I never want to fall away from God. And yet there's this piece there, which I understand where that was coming from, wanting people to stay on a path of life. But it's like, we're here to grow. We're here, and growth involves change. And I just think it's been interesting to kind of look at that and to observe, what does that look like to be on a path of spiritual growth, no matter what tradition you're in. I think that is an interesting thing to chew on, but I forget where we were going with that last part, but the idea of, for me, why is this idea of and so important right now? I think everywhere you look in the world, we're at a point where there's just so much division. There's so much, really, division is turning to hatred and disgust and the inability to recognize someone else's humanity if they are in a group that you despise or that you feel is harming the world, harming culture, harming people. I think it's really hard to hold an and there when in lots of people's cases, they personally feel endangered by someone else's worldview. Right. They feel threatened, and they feel like that others are making them so unsafe that it's like almost just this protective measure to be
survival.
Yeah, survival. To push, basically to not leave any room for curiosity with someone who sees things so differently. And I mean, I think it's very hard because there's so many people with very valid feelings of pain and hurt by what others are doing. I happened to see that Oprah had done an interview recently with people who had completely cut off contact with family members, and so she did this whole episode about going no contact and how many people have gone no contact with children or with parents, and the reasons why. And it was really an interesting conversation, and there was a lot of people that shared reasons that you could very much understand, like they were in harmful, toxic, like dangerous relationships with family members. And then there were situations where the question was asked, like, are we forgetting, or are we losing the ability to communicate and hear each other? And is it just easier to say, that's it, I'm not talking to them anymore. I'm going no contact.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, so what do you guys think about that? Like, I mean, it's obvious what you just said is, given the story about Oprah, but also just the division that there is with just like big topics around the world right now. I mean, do you have any thoughts on like how do you hold that? How does one
Yeah, I do
keep the curiosity alive or ask questions?
I feel
I don't have the answers.
Like one of the things I
Maybe you
don't
do.
have the answers, but I think the only thing I can do is reflect on my own situation. I think
Yeah.
the people that I get most triggered by
Okay.
are usually people from a similar stream that I grew up in. So, for example, I have journal entries from when I was 12 years old. I've always been a journaler and I've enjoyed writing my thoughts down. So I have one from when I was 12 years old in Santa Cruz, where I grew up. My dad had been voted head of the Republican Central Committee, which was like, a lower level of government in Santa Cruz County. And at the time, my mom will cringe about me mentioning this, but my mom, because this isn't the way that she feels any longer, but she really loved Rush Limbaugh. And so she had a Rush is Right bumper sticker.
I remember those.
Yep. And so very steeped at that time in my family in conservative politics and faith tradition. So as a young person, I was listening to voices who were very clear cut, this is like all those stupid feminazis and all of those, liberals that are destroying America. So I grew up hearing that, not from my parents necessarily, but they were listening to those voices. And so in my journal when I was 12, I wrote, "Today was the 4th of July parade, and I got to ride on the Republican Central Committee's float. It was great. We just waved our flags in the faces of all those pro-choicers." And like it was this, I absorbed from a little child that we were the good ones and we had the right, answers. And all those liberals in Santa Cruz where we live, all the hippies and all the people who want the opposite that we want. My mom was really involved in the pro-life organizations and had lots of friends across different Christian traditions, Catholics and Christians, who would protest at abortion clinics. So I would go with my mom to those. And when I was in 7th grade, I wrote my debate report on abortion. And I remember standing in front of my class, "Raise your hand if you are pro-life. Raise your hand if you're pro-choice." And I looked out at my classmates and I was like, "By the end of this project, I hope to convince you, otherwise," or whatever. And so I was very,
Those are two great examples.
passionate.
Yeah.
But, and I'm not saying I'm, in all the areas that I now see things totally differently, but I see them with so much more nuance. Obviously, I definitely don't align with the Republican Party anymore.
Right.
But because of my background and because of my certainty that I can look back and feel in my body, I remember even when, as an adult in my church, having a dear friend who she had joined our church and we were doing Bible studies together, and she hadn't really read the Bible much, so I felt like I was kind of taking her under my wing and mentoring her in the ways of understanding Scripture. And I knew that she was pro-choice, and I would just be like, oh my gosh, trying to argue it with her, and she was like, "Sarah, I'm sorry. That's just not how I see it. I think that, women should have the opportunity, and I don't think that goes against my faith in any way." And just, I remember the feeling of frustration of like, but no, there's this one right way. And the way that kept me from, it kept me in a mindset of, well, I'm right, and eventually she's going to come around. At least that's what I have to pray towards. Yeah. So those are because that's me. Like, it's very tricky because I will see people in the world who carry that same frequency of certainty, who have this energy of, the world is going to pieces because of all of these sinful things that are happening in the world, or coming from a sense and really making those who disagree with them out to be ignorant. And that's what triggers me the most. I think that's what makes me feel frustrated. And then I just pause for a minute and I remember that I was that. So it's really interesting because it makes me feel, my kids did not grow up in the church the way that I did. And when they have experienced kids that were just like me at their school, so they'll have like, gosh, I thought this friend of mine I thought she really wanted to get to know me, but now I think she just wants me to come to her church. And it's kind of awkward because I don't really know, or I did go to her church youth group and it was fine, but I don't know that I want to keep going. And I am always trying to help my kids see but you have to understand their heart, because I knew I was that way,
right.
And it was coming from such love.
Yeah.
So I guess I'm saying all of this to just, I guess the only way that I know how to be in that middle of when there's someone that you really disagree with and you are so tempted to be like, you're an asshole, you're disgusting,
Yeah.
that's so harmful, that view is so ignorant. The only way that I know is in that situation, I just can pause and be like, that was me. And I couldn't see out of it until I could. And for me, the only thing that helped me see was relationship. It was people opening my heart and helping me recognize, they're not dangerous liberals. They're actually just like,
just living their life as an example in front of you.
Yeah, I think proximity. Okay, that out of anything is, to me, I think the saddest thing right now is that we have algorithms that are pulling us into these silos, that are pulling us into these places of only hearing what we already agree with again and again. And I just think proximity to people who have different views gives you the opportunity to see in real life, I might hate their politics, but that person loves their grandmother because I see the way that they give up their time every week and they do this thing. Or I might really be bothered by the way that person speaks condescendingly about a certain people group. And that's not okay. And yet I also see the way that they show up every week and serve at the soup kitchen that they're a part of. It's like, it makes you remember their humanity.
Yeah.
And I think it's so easy to forget that when we're pulled back into our little separate groups. But anyway,
That's a really good reminder.
Lots to chew on in this topic, and maybe we can just, as we get ready to wrap this up, because we're already it's 48 minutes, I guess we're at right now, is just maybe let's talk about some of the things that we're excited to continue to share in going forward in terms of this podcast. Like, what kind of things? Maybe you guys just want me to talk about it, but is there anything you're interested in talking about that we've planned on saying?
I'm interested in, you have a great way of sharing different methods that you have found to learn about who you are as a person and your part that you play and the giftings you come in with, and then how they all work together with people around you, community around you, humanity itself. And that is it's so beautiful. And I can't wait for you just to share those, because as people get to hear that and apply it and try it, and I think it's such a amazing growth tool for growth. There we go.
Yes.
Yeah, I can attest to that. We've had a lot of fun having so many conversations around our design and all the different ways we've come about with that exploration. It's been huge for me.
I think that's
me as well.
It's given me some insight that I don't know that I could have gotten otherwise.
Yeah, I can't wait to talk about that.
Yeah,
absolutely.
It'll be fun.
So the next 2 episodes here that are planned. So today was all about the and of holding 2 opposing things at once, or maybe just the both and. And next week, we are going to dive into the idea of one. This one, I think, will be a little more, it'll require a little bit more digging, but just in terms of how are we all connected? And is that even true? And are we one, like as humanity? One with what? What does that mean? Yeah. So that'll be fun to dive into. And then the following podcast, we will talk about other, which will be kind of an intro point into learning about our distinction and how do we do that? What are the ways that we have learned about our uniqueness and how that has benefited us, which it has, we just shared. And then from there, I think moving on, I think another idea of one and other, I'd really like to explore the ideas of masculine and feminine. I think right now I have a non-binary child, so even in masculine, feminine, non-binary, like what is that whole picture? Not necessarily in terms of body gender, but also in terms of this idea of the archetypes of, yin and yang, or, positive, negative polarity, basically. We could talk about that, whether we do, several on that. I could see us going into that. I think for me personally, in terms of spirituality and my evolving faith, I was really, really blown away by discovering about this concept of divine feminine and what, growing up in my church world, I only heard about the divine spoken of it in the masculine pronoun. So it was always he. God is so good. He's so good. But anytime if anyone would have said, well, the divine feminine, like she is watching over you, I could feel like, what? That would have been scary to me. Why was it scary to me? I mean, that has been a really powerful road to explore, and we will definitely talk about that. What does that look like? I think there's a ton of different avenues, books and music, things that will guide our conversations moving forward, and I'm excited. And I'm excited. Have a lot of potential people that we're going to hopefully hunt down and see if we can get them on the podcast. But thank you so much, friends, for helping me be brave. This has been something I've been eager to do, but needed your support. Oh, let's do this little cheesy thing that I wrote down at the end.
All right, what is it?
Okay, so as we close up this first episode of the One Another podcast, this is our closing statement.
Oh.
Let's love one another, friends.
Our differences are our superpowers.
And every one of us belongs. Yeah, that's what I think. All right. So love you, friends. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening to the One Another podcast. As we begin this journey, your support means so much. Following or subscribing to the show and sharing it with others helps these conversations grow. Until next time.